do believe I already have the fuel pump wire over there. Got our ignition wire, starter motor solenoid. Shouldn't be too much to get this. Just get a little temporary switch panel set up so I can start it when I need to. Alright, I got myself a little switch panel there. Okay, that's all I need for right now to get it started. If I take it out on the road later, I'll put a couple more switches in there. Okay, getting all this fuel pump wiring loomed up. Got it connected, grounded. Gonna need to do some zip ties on that. Later on I'll put some proper mounts. But there is the fuel pump wiring. Just run it under and up the front there. Oh boy. Gotta find the connector for the fuel pump sensor, or the oil pressure sensor. And it's gotta be in this one, I think. Okay, that's one box sorted. Got some relays set aside, flasher relay, turn signal relays for the fans, some lights, dome light, connector for the steering column. Got the steering column switch, reverse, and then it's like an ignition disconnect, so it needs to be in park or neutral to start. Connectors for the dash, lights for the dash, fuses, stuff for the radio. Need to find out where that's at, so put the wiring with it. There's the radio and my switches. Okay, that took about 2 hours to sort through these wires and go through boxes to find what I need. Got wiring that goes back to the rear taillights, brake light, left turn signal, right turn signal, and reverse light. That's just extra wiring I think I will need. There's a bag of connectors, a bag of relays. Got my gauge cluster, and my temperature gauges there. Found a little Pepe frog. Got the solenoid that activates the starter motor relocated, bolted over here instead of up on this thing. I would like to replace this at some point. It's a kind of a funky bracket thing going on there. And I like the idea of having everything mounted off of the engine as much as possible anyway. Run the wires around it, and instead of over it, this is going to go this way instead of that way. Getting things individually loomed up so I don't have to, so it's easier to work on. I don't have to dig through a bundle of wires. So this is the starter motor solenoid, which goes to this solenoid, which goes to the start button. Pulled out the park brake and reverse light switch, and I am just now noticing this splice job. I'm going from like a 12 gauge down to a 16 gauge, a little tiny wire here. It's just, I'm gonna fix that real quick, but I also notice it's labeled. It says 2 park brake light. I'm drawing a blank on what that might be, but it definitely splices off. There's a snipped wire up here. That's more like 14 gauge, and this is like 18 gauge. Some solder, and some heat shrink. And that's how that's supposed to be. That's interesting. This says from park brake switch to park brake light. There's something in there. Just a, I don't know why that would matter. Which way you put that? There must be a diode in there or something. Alright, so we got the reverse light connection, which are pretty thin wires. Those more than likely went off to a relay, which is how I will wire it up. Then from the relay to the lights themselves. One of these will be grounded, and one of these will go to one side of the solenoid, which activates the starter motor solenoid. So if this is not in park, the RV will not start. Got some more wires lengthened so I could put them where I want it. This is the connection to the ignition coil. Got a positive connection and a tachometer connection. Don't have a tachometer yet, but I figure I might down the road, so got that lengthened as well. Alright, that's the rest of my 10 gauge, at least of this Skid Quality Radio Shack stuff. I was trying to sort through the old wires of the RV through those bundles, but it's hard to find a solid piece of anything, so I just got out some new stuff. I got that soldered on. Having some black beans and rice. A little bit of salt, it's delicious. Can't remember the last time I had black beans, but that's pretty good stuff. Radio Shack, Radio Shack, Radio Shack, Radio Shack. Ah, I missed that store. Can somebody tell me what that is? Got a lot hooked up. We got the kick down connection on there. Kick down wire. Got it up here, got it labeled, got everything labeled. Fuel gauge, fuel pump, tachometer, look that up later, ignition. Everything loomed. And we'll clean that up later when I know everything works out good. So yeah, everything tied up and out of the way, off the engine as much as possible. You need to connect up, need to test this park and neutral switch and reverse light switch. We got a reverse light connection here and the park and neutral connection for starting. And this is adjustable, so I need to make sure that is working right. Park, reverse gear, that is neutral. Oh, that's off. Yeah, that's trying to go off in between neutral and drive, so let's adjust that a little bit. Got a 1/4 inch socket. Just loosen that a little bit on that side. A little bit on that side. I want a closed connection on park and on neutral. Okay, we are in neutral. That's drive, neutral, reverse, park. That's what we want. Snug that down. Let's park. Reverse. Okay, a little adjustment there. Probably moved when I tightened things down. Let's double check the reverse light connection, or connection to the relay that controls the reverse lights. Okay, looking good. I'll do the turn signal and brights connection later on. Let's see, we got turn signal, brights. I guess wiper stuff, cruise control stuff, although that was a separate wire for cruise control. I'm using a different fuse block, so I don't need these connectors anymore. I do still have the connector for that. Yeah, this stuff we can do later. Brake lights later. Brake lights. Got these off of this weird alternator bracket, which I think is, it puts the alternator up high so it can have 2 smog pumps. If I remember correctly, it had 2 smog pumps. And those are just distribution for my electric fans, which, yeah, we'll do something different. I'm not putting stuff, no more wires on the engine. I want this as clean as possible. Obviously, there will be maybe 1 or 2 for sensors, or a coolant sensor. There's the original sensor there. Alright, so we got a battery cable run up here, a little thicker than you normally would put on an alternator, but I am combining a couple connections here. We got that 6 gauge wire to run up here to the dash area. A 10 gauge here, also to the positive. Also added in this ground. It's the exact length I need to make it to the battery, so we just have an extra ground, which doesn't hurt. You never know if we got crusty. We got a pretty decent ground over here, but since these are direct connections to the batteries with no fuses, I got them protected in some old garden hose. Pretty securely mounted, but that's going to be temporary. At some point I'll make a little bracket with hose clamps or pipe clamps on them that can really clamp down on these and hold them, you know, tuck them away better. And this stuff is all sitting right above the exhaust, so that is also something I'm going to need to keep an eye on. Make sure things aren't getting too hot and damaging the wires. But for a temporary situation, that's going to work very well. I'm also going to take out the electric fans and put the mechanical back in, so there's always some sort of a current blowing over the engine and everything, I think it's just a better idea. I'd rather have these as backup. So later on we'll do a fan shroud. I'm gonna have to make my own since they don't really have a good option at all at the auto parts store. A really expensive option too. I'm not interested in doing that. So we got our alternator positive, thermostat connection, running that loom. Lots of loom. It's keeping it off the engine though. I'm liking the way this is turning out. Go ahead and hook up this wire, which is for the transmission temperature gauge, an oil sensor. Almost done here, I think. Almost get all this. It's probably maybe one or close to the last wire I need to fish through here, and then I can start putting on some fuses and get some breakers hooked back up. Get the switches set up. Alright, got those fans removed and rerouted this wire over. Figured everything's going through right there for the alternator, might as well run over the energizing wire and the connection for that thermostat. So we got two more connectors toward the bottom of the engine. On the bottom toward the front of the engine, got an oil pressure switch for the fuel pump relay, and need a connection. Need a female disconnect for a oil pressure sensor for the pressure gauge, oil pressure gauge, which is going to be pretty important. I'm not going to bother putting in the gauge cluster just yet, but I am going to make sure I hook up this pressure switch, so if for some reason the oil pump quits working, it'll shut the fuel pump off and keep me from hurting the engine. So this thing's pretty grungy. Using some rubbing alcohol and water, clean it up pretty good. I'm going to put a piece of heat shrink toward the bottom of this. These are looking kinda worn. Okay, that is shrinking back from the edge, unsurprisingly. There's heat shrink after all. That still might help a little bit, but I'm gonna try and double that up, see if I can get a little more support. Okay, that'll help a little bit. I kept the heat gun away from this edge so it didn't shrink back. I got close though. That worked out pretty good for a little strain relief there. I could just find a ground spot down below and save me a little bit of wire, but I don't have to extend these two that far, and I might as well just run it up with the other one. Ground it in the cab, give it a good ground. I don't have to worry about. Hard to reach locations. Alright, there we go. Some loom on there. Got a couple more wires to mark, but one of them's marked. These two will be oil pressure switch. That's oil pressure sensor. This is a reused piece of loom and it had some heat damage. Wasn't too bad, but it's opened up a little bit and making the wires want to fall out, so taped up a little bit there. Got that labeled. All right. Okay, decided to add on one more wire while I'm down here. That is this brake sensor wire. I believe it's a low brake pressure warning, according to a wiring diagram. So one last wire. Ran out of wire loom. Used up all my 1/4 inch. Still got enough to get it up into the cab, that's alright. Okay. Couldn't find the original plate that went here, so I just made a new one out of some 16 gauge. Making some marks. Made it a little bit bigger too, so I have more room, more space to place things and have room to run the wires. Alright, got that fuse block installed, got a ground, got the smaller 10 gauge positive for the lighter loads like relay switches, LED lighting, and we got the thicker 6 gauge coming up here to the breakers for heavier loads like the headlights, air compressor, you know, all the other loads. We're going to connect the relay loads over here. Relays will be powered by there. Got things loomed up and protected. This fuse block came with a bunch of bus bars for the ground, so that's handy. We'll add some relay switches. Need to go through, we got a wiring diagram I got for the RV. But I'm gonna call it good on that video. It's getting kind of long. Got a lot done. So we'll call this wiring install, and then we'll do, in the next video will be wiring connections or something. Also decided to trim this down and keep these on here. That way it saves space for the rest of the relays. There's not going to be nearly enough room for everything. So we got a nice little breaker strip there. Got a blank one. It had one in it, but I don't think I'm going to need it. If I need it, we can put it right back in. So that is coming along quite nicely. I like it. So stay tuned. In the next video, we'll be getting everything wired up and giving Patches a startup. Got a lot done. I love how I've managed to keep any wires from crossing over the engine. And, except for spark plug wires, of course, but yeah, that's much nicer. Gonna be much easier to work on in the future if I need to do anything. If I get into RV building, which I really want to, I'd like to build another one and do this a little differently. All my RVs will be built for easy maintenance and easy repairs, more user-friendly than what they usually come as. Right now a little sloppy with all the zip ties and stuff, and you could use some a little better wire management. But I've also taken a lot of things out, like the wiring that connects the two systems, the house and the chassis. Simplifying, downsizing. I like it. And I realize this is not an automotive fuse block. I think I might have purchased this as a marine fuse block. It's just a cheap fuse block from eBay. Everything shares a common connection to positive, so this is going to be either constant current or switched current. And I'm not sure if I want this to be constant current, so I might disconnect this and have this attached to a relay that's operated by the ignition key. So this powers up when the key is on. So there's a little more figuring out to do. Might have to add in a few more fuses aside from this. Next video will connect all these wires up, so stay tuned.